In 1963, Chrysler handed 203 ordinary American families the keys to a car powered by a jet engine. Not a car inspired by jet technology, an actual jet engine, one that could run on diesel, kerosene, perfumed tequila, or peanut oil. For 3 years, those families drove it to work, to school, to the grocery store. Then Chrysler took every single car back and destroyed them. What they were trying to hide is one of the most fascinating stories Detroit never wanted you to know. Detroit in the late 1950s was obsessed with power. Car ads boasted ever bigger V8 engines, chrome sparkled from every dealership lot, and horsepower became a kind of national bragging right. But beneath the roar and shine, every piston engine was a complex maze of moving parts, hundreds of pistons, valves, rods, and springs, all hammering away in a symphony of controlled explosions. Each mile driven meant thousands of tiny detonations, each one demanding perfect timing. The result was constant vibration, relentless wear, and a never-ending need for oil, tune-ups, and repairs. For most, this was simply the price of progress. But inside Chrysler's Aero division, a young engineer named George Hubner saw something different. He looked at the guts of a V8 and wondered, why should a car engine be a ticking time bomb of parts waiting to fail? Hubner imagined an engine as simple as a spinning wheel. Air in, fuel burns, one high-speed rotor turning power into motion. No pistons, no crankshaft, none of the ancient mechanics borrowed from the steam age. He compared the old piston engine to a grandfather clock, with gears and springs always at risk of jamming, while the turbine was a single rotor, smooth, silent, almost timeless. Detroit's horsepower war had set the stage for a radical question. What if the future of driving wasn't more power, but less complexity? Hubner's vision quietly challenged everything the industry took for granted, and in the shadow of the V8 thunder, he began the search for a new kind of engine, one that might change American cars forever. Chrysler's secret turbine project began behind locked doors in 1945, years before the public would hear even a whisper. George Hubner and his team worked in guarded labs, sketching out engines that looked nothing like Detroit's piston monsters. Their goal was radical: replace the chaos of hundreds of moving parts with a single rotor, the way a jet engine powers a plane. Internal memos from the early 50s described the dream: an engine so smooth, so simple, it was like trading a ticking, gear-filled grandfather clock for a silent, balanced wheel. But ideas on paper weren't enough. By 1956, Chrysler was ready to prove the turbine worked outside the lab. They bolted a 130-horsepower turbine into a Plymouth and set it loose on American highways. The plan was bold: a cross-country drive over 3,500 miles, logged carefully on mileage sheets tucked into the glove box. This wasn't a stunt for the press, it was a trial by asphalt, a way to see if a car powered by a single rotor turbine could keep pace with the country's best V8 engines. The prototype started from cold in under 15 seconds, no choke, no stalling, just a rising whir and a rush of air. Drivers reported a strange absence of vibration, a near silence that felt almost unnatural after years of piston clatter. The logs showed the Plymouth kept up with traffic, running on a range of fuels that would have choked a normal engine. For the first time, the turbine's promise moved from theory to evidence. A car that could cross America not with explosions, but with a single, spinning heart. Chrysler's ambitions took on a physical form in 1963. When the company did not just build a single prototype, they commissioned 55 turbine-powered cars, each one handcrafted with a level of care usually reserved for European exotics. Rather than using their own assembly lines, Chrysler turned to Ghia of Turin, Italy, a coach builder known for sculpting bodies like works of art. The result was a fleet finished in a distinctive copper-bronze paint with lines that caught the light and a jet-age dashboard that made the driver's seat feel more like a cockpit than a car. Every detail was intentional. The turbine cars wore turbine-inspired wheel covers, and their tailpipes hinted at the power inside. The interior was trimmed in rich leather, and the controls were laid out with a clarity that echoed the engine's simplicity. But this level of craftsmanship came at a staggering price. Each car cost Chrysler about $50,000 to produce, 10 times the price of a new Imperial. Internal memos revealed that the company accepted these costs as the price of true experimentation. These were not showpieces for executives. They were built to be driven, to gather real data from real families, and to see if a radical idea could survive on American streets. For a brief moment, the future of driving sat gleaming in driveways across the country, as ordinary people became test pilots for a machine unlike anything Detroit had ever released. When Chrysler handed over the keys to 203 families across America, the experiment left the lab and entered daily life. Diaries from the trial period describe weeks of school runs, grocery trips, and cross-country vacations, over 1 million miles logged by ordinary drivers. The turbine cars glided through city streets and highways with a smoothness that felt uncanny. There was no engine rumble, no shaking at idle, just a gentle whir that made conversations in the cabin effortless. Families reported skipping oil changes for months, and the maintenance logs show almost no breakdowns, an unheard-of record for early 60s Detroit iron. The engine's appetite for fuel bordered on legendary: diesel, kerosene, even cheap heating oil. If it burned, the turbine would run. One family famously poured in a splash of Chanel No. 5 perfume just to see what would happen. The car started and drove without complaint, leaving a faint, expensive scent lingering in the air. Drivers marveled at winter mornings when the turbine spun to life in under 15 seconds, with no need for chokes or prayers. For most, the experience felt like a glimpse of the future, a car that shrugged off the daily grind, ready for whatever the road and its drivers could throw at it. Service technicians kept detailed logs as the turbine cars racked up miles, but beneath the smooth ride, new problems surfaced that could not be solved with a simple wrench. The most common complaint was throttle lag. When drivers pressed the accelerator, they waited nearly 2 seconds before the engine responded, a delay traced to the inertia of the spinning turbine and the time it took for fuel flow to catch up. In city traffic, this made the car feel slow off the line, a sharp contrast to the instant punch of Detroit's V8 engines. Heat was another silent adversary. The turbine's exhaust routinely reached 500 degrees Fahrenheit, far hotter than any piston engine. Mechanics noted that even with heavy shielding heat seeped into the cabin and threatened to warp plastic trim or soften nearby body panels. Engineers tried to tame it with regenerators and special alloys, but those fixes came at a steep price. The nickel-based blades and high-tolerance bearings demanded aerospace-level precision, pushing manufacturing costs skyward. Chrysler's own cost memos show that each engine required hand finishing and inspections far beyond what a mass-market car could afford. What looked like elegant simplicity on paper hid a reality of exotic metals, microscopic tolerances, and a price tag that grew with every improvement. The dream of a maintenance-free engine was shadowed by a new kind of complexity, one measured not in moving parts but in dollars and degrees. By the early 1970s, outside forces closed in around Chrysler's turbine dream. The Clean Air Act set strict new limits on nitrogen oxide emissions, targeting the very heart of the turbine's design. EPA test reports landed on executive desks, showing that the turbine's hot, high-pressure combustion produced nitrogen oxide levels far above the new federal thresholds. Engineers scrambled to find a fix, experimenting with after-treatment systems and costly add-ons, but every solution made the engine heavier, more complex, and even less viable for mass production. Then came the oil crisis of 1973. Gasoline prices doubled, lines stretched for blocks, and American drivers turned away from big, powerful engines. Chrysler's sales collapsed almost overnight. Shareholder memos from this period reveal mounting anxiety. The turbine, already expensive to build, now looked like a financial black hole. The board weighed the numbers: $50,000 per car, millions more dollars needed to chase emissions compliance, and saw no path forward. In 1979, the final decision arrived. Board meeting minutes record a unanimous vote. The turbine program would end, and the cars would be destroyed. 46 of the 55 hand-built turbine cars were ordered scrapped, their bodies crushed and engines dismantled. George Huebner, who had championed the project for decades, watched as years of work vanished in a matter of days. The hope of a turbine-powered America was over, not because the engine failed, but because the world around it changed faster than anyone could have predicted. Detroit's turbine dream, one spinning wheel, not a maze of explosions, proved too bold for its time. Yet today, as electric vehicles chase simplicity and flexibility, the questions Chrysler dared to ask echo louder than ever. Some innovations do not disappear. They wait for a world finally ready to listen. If you want more stories about the engineering Detroit buried, subscribe. We cover the forgotten history the textbooks skip.